Hello, Burbankers. Welcome back to another segment of our Mike and Roy series, interviewing all the candidates coming up for our City Council election. And with us today, special guest, Dr. David Gordon, who currently sits on our City Council. And welcome, Dr. Gordon. Nice to have you.
Thanks for being here today.
Glad to be here.
Let's get to the questions. The first question that we have for you, and these are questions, not just questions that Roy and I wanted to ask the candidates, but questions from other members of Save Burbank Neighborhoods, concerns about issues around the city. And the first question is, what do you love most about Burbank?
Well, there's a lot of things to love about Burbank. I appreciate and enjoy everything in terms of parks, services, neighborhoods, different neighborhoods, but the most important thing are the people of Burbank. That's what made me decide to make my home here, raise my family here. I have absolutely no regrets, and I'd like to stay here as long as I can because it's just a wonderful people place. And I've been all around the world and I've met lots of people, but if I had my one pick, I would want to come home to Burbank.
Why are you running for City Council?
Well, I've seen a lot of things over the past 25 years that I've been involved in local affairs. And I really feel it's important that the people of Burbank have a strong voice on the council. I've seen people coming and speaking at meetings and council meetings and events, and very often they're, smile and thank you for coming. But to be really listened to and to turn that into action in the council and not dismiss concerns or to say that we can't do that because it wasn't done before or that heaven forbid, our hands are tied, that's not good. So I want to think that I am able to shed light on important issues, share important information that I've learned and gathered, and also be a strong voice for the people I represent.
As a City Council member, you obviously know that a lot of prep time goes into being ready for City Council meetings. How many hours a week do you see yourself reading to prepare for the City Council meeting?
Well, I'm happy to say that it's gone down a little bit for me because when I first became a council member a number of years back, it really took a lot of work. I really read every single detail and tried to get up on the background and all that. Now I put in, if it's an average council meeting with not too many special events, somewhere between 2 to 4 hours I'll put in on reading material, studying and reviewing. If it's some special event, a big public hearing or something, quite a bit more. Some of the documents are very voluminous. Sometimes I need to call different departments and check. Sometimes I have to call state agencies. So I certainly do my homework and I get the research in, but I'd say on average between 2 to 4 hours.
You mentioned big projects. What are your thoughts on the Hilaria project here in Burbank?
Well, unfortunately, I feel the Hilaria project is too big and too dense for where it was approved to go in. I feel, more importantly, that the process by which that vote was taken was flawed and faulty. I feel that there are going to be significant traffic impacts. We already see streets barricaded before the thing is even constructed. It has totally caused stress and disruption in the community, and it hasn't even been built yet. Part of the things that were of concern on that project was that when we tried to find out about what the actual arrangements were with the supposed Whole Foods that was going to come in, we couldn't see a lease to understand the terms. Was it a short-term, long-term commitment? Or if in fact we were actually going to get the Whole Foods that was promised, this sort of sizzle in the state. And the fact that we learned that there was 1 day of traffic study in a highly traffic impacted area. And more importantly, people talk about traffic impacts in the city and traffic congestion and what can we do? Is it signal timing? If you keep improving projects that are so dense and perhaps not sufficient parking, you're going to have these impacts and they build upon each other. So I hope the project does well, I hope it integrates in the community, but from my perspective it could have been done a lot better, and most importantly, that for my concern, it was fiscally responsible when the council voted to give away what I felt were millions of dollars worth of what they called remnant city parcels to the developer for a fraction of their true value. And it was essentially a multi-million-dollar giveaway in my view. And so that was very discouraging for me on that project.
What's your impression of the current city council, and if you're re-elected, what kind of changes might you like to see?
Everyone's an individual in the council. I respect each and every council member for their views and perspectives. But there are a few things that I would hope would improve on whatever the new composition of the new council would be. First of all, a lot of talk is done about transparency, but there has not been adequate transparency in my view. Time and time again, things happen. Nobody knew. The people in the community don't know. There are projects that are approved, things are done in closed session, some of which need to be done in closed session, but some of which, in my opinion, absolutely should be engaging the people in part of the process. That was not done on a number of projects, in my view, and I'm concerned. So I would really want to push for more accountability of what's happening, more transparency of what's really going on. And when there are issues that arise, not just sit back and say, well, those things happen, but get to the bottom of it, find out, so we don't repeat the same things over and over again.
Dr. Gordon, please define your position on the scandals that have plagued the police department here in Burbank and the current status of BPD.
I'll just take that as a two-parter. As far as what you're referring to as scandals, the police issues we had a few years back, I was here from the very beginning and outset, and unfortunately, I believe the initial concerns were, by some folks in the city, not responded to adequately and swiftly enough. It wasn't until things really heated up and got bad. And from the very beginning, I had concerns. There were some anonymous letters that came in that had enough material that was deeply troubling to me. And as we saw over the years, we wound up spending millions and millions of dollars in litigation costs that I feel should have been avoided. As far as why that was there, I think that there had been a culture that evolved, a dysfunctional culture, not only within our police department, but also as it integrated with our city attorney's office. And you might call it enabling. One department might have enabled another. Things were done, well, that's the way we do things. And there wasn't a check and balance system that would prevent or stop these things from happening. And when the mess finally came to the surface and there were police officers' careers involved, and there were outside investigators and attorneys and lawsuits, it was just terrible. One of the true black periods in our city's history. That being said, it's not to malign the entire department either now or then. I believe there have been great strides made. I am very pleased to see many of the improvements. Our police department and its officers are evolving. They are broadening their perspective. They have a strategic plan. They have different oversight and check. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. It's an ongoing process. And I think if you ask the police chief or any of the members of the department, is there room for improvement? Absolutely there is. Have there been missteps since the former issues? Perhaps there have been missteps. But those need to be recognized and corrected. So I think what we see now is our mechanisms that have been put in place to prevent the types of things we've seen before. A culture, a dysfunctional culture within the department, as I think that's been addressed. And I think we're going to hopefully see new evolving officers coming on board, rising through the ranks, and again making Burbank's police department truly recognizable as one of the top forces, police forces and departments in the country.
Save Burbank Neighborhoods took a very strong position on Measure B, a recent ballot measure that we dealt with here in Burbank that involved the airport. Do you have any qualms about how Measure B was presented to Burbank residents?
I also took some issues with Measure B, in fact quite a few issues with Measure B. Yes, I have quite a few qualms with Measure B. I'll try to be as brief as I can. First of all,
we got plenty of time, Dr. Gordon.
Well, first of all, the entire process of the Measure B vote, which involved changing certain land use controls from the city over to airport decision making, and the possibility of building a new airport terminal project, was a massive project, something that was one of the biggest decisions and projects that I've seen in 25 years of involvement in local government. In my view, it was absolutely a rush to judgment. The process involved some 45 closed session meetings. Now, sometimes it's important to have closed session meetings where the public is not participating, rather certain negotiations or legal matters. But I'm sorry, I believe for a year and a half or two that those closed sessions were going on, the public was left completely in the dark. Then, when it finally did come forward, the public didn't have the advantage of having seen all the discussions and deliberations. It was a long and complicated agreement. No one really understood or appreciated, in my view, what was going on. It was hard for even the participants on the council to get a full appreciation of all the details and ramifications. Then there was a rush to judgment to push this on the November ballot, a ballot that not only was a big presidential election, but had many, many items on there. So I doubt, even for the people who voted for Measure B, the new terminal, I doubt many, if any of them, really had a chance to wade through all the thousands of pages of documents and evaluate the impacts of that. Now, the second thing that's extremely troubling and concerns, and I think it's something that people might not be aware of totally, but they need to, is that there was some money, in the order of $50,000. There was a lot of money spent to promote the pro-Measure B. Government should not ever be involved in political campaigns. Government should not ever be involved in financing political candidates or ballot measures. It's just not the way it works. I'm not a lawyer, but it sounds pretty illegal to me for that to happen. And what we've had exposed recently is that the Burbank Hospitality Association, which is an organization that was enabled and developed and serves and exists at the pleasure of the city government, city council, apparently during a meeting, one of the proponents of the airport Measure B vote came down and requested $50,000 to educate the public. And like magic, not appearing on the agenda, action was taken, and apparently $50,000 was conveyed and used for this political position. It wasn't brought up by city officials. It wasn't brought up by members of the committee. It only came out by a member of the public bringing it forward. Now, what's being done about it? When this item came to the council recently, I made a motion because the law seems very clear that if an organization misappropriates government funds, these are tax dollars, that there's a process which calls for a public hearing to see whether this organization should be continued to be endorsed and supported by the city. I made a motion to disestablish, have a public hearing to disestablish this organization. I did not get a second, so that request to do that died. I asked that we subpoena each and every member of that committee and anyone involved with that. Now, we have on the council the authority to subpoena people and insist that they answer questions under a penalty of perjury. I wanted that to happen. No support in the council. And when you realize that the other 4 council members were strong proponents of the Measure B, questions come to mind. So absolutely, I am displeased with what happened with the Measure B vote. That being said, the voters spoke, it went through, and my position at this point is we have to make sure that the elements that were voted on by the people are completely and fully supported and enforced as they should be.
Dr. Gordon, recently Burbank resident and Save Burbank Neighborhoods member David Spell broke the news that you're speaking about the corruption in Burbank in regards to a very serious election fraud scandal. While he was revealing this scandal about the $50,000 to our city council in his 5 minutes of public comment, 2 council members were texting and typing, wouldn't even look up to acknowledge him. What are your thoughts on that? How do you feel about that as a sitting council member?
Well, I think that each and every council member has an obligation to listen to people who come and speak or send letters or emails to the council, because our job is to represent the people of our community. I think it is disrespectful and inappropriate for council members to not be attending to whoever may be speaking or whatever issues are being discussed. It's unfortunate when these things happen. I've always tried to attend when people are listening, speaking rather, so that I can understand what their concerns are and address them, and not just simply say thank you for coming. It's an effort for people to come to city council. They have families, they have jobs, times might be off. So I really give people credit. And I might add that for many, many years, I was on the other side of the dais, coming to the council and expressing my views and concerns. And very often I was dismissed and my concerns were ignored. So I don't think that's appropriate conduct for any council member. And I would hope that if the individuals who might not have been listening take heed and pay attention, because voters may be fooled once or twice, but they will eventually see who's truly representing them and attending to their concerns and who isn't.
Well, the next question also deals with the misappropriation of the $50,000 that came from the Burbank Hospitality Association to the Committee for Yes on Measure B. You pretty much answered that in another response, but as a follow-up, do you plan on getting that $50,000 back for Burbank residents?
Well, the way you ask the question, I think it's a little bit difficult to respond. We don't really know exactly who it was that was the source of this money. This comes from, I understand, a surtax or surcharge on hotel stays. We don't know if they were residents or people from out of the area, nor do we identify it. And as I understand, these fees are turned over through the hotel that collects them. So it's probably going to be impractical, if not impossible, to, if this money could somehow be recouped, to be returned to those individuals who paid it. Most important to my concern, it goes back in the early days. I remember watching the Watergate hearings. I want to know, what did they know and when did they know it? Was this transaction preordained? Was it a done deal and just a ceremony that went on? Or was this some errant person who just happened to come down to this meeting that no one seemed to have known about and just asked for $50,000? This type of conduct is absolutely unacceptable. I still maintain that we should have all those involved come in public before the council and answer under penalty of perjury what the involvement was, what their knowledge was, how did this happen, and this should not be acceptable by either proponents or opponents of Measure B, because this is not acceptable, or dare I say, it seems to me not even legal behavior.
Dr. Gordon, it seems that much of the present city council is courting developers rather than representing the very residents who voted them in. How do you plan to balance the future growth of Burbank with residents' desires to maintain our small town legacy?
I appreciate the question. One of the very first campaign pledges I made when I first ran for council, and has been consistent throughout, is to always put the people first. I was not elected by developers. Dare I say, I don't get a lot of campaign contributions from developers. And I don't necessarily court campaign contributions or support from developers. I think developers play a very important role in our community and bring projects, but we need to show leadership on the council as to what types of projects come through in our city. What's good for Santa Monica or good for West Los Angeles or any other city in California might be different than what's good for Burbank. And on the council, I think we have to be very attentive to the various neighborhoods and residents here. And so we understand what they would like to have and what they see. Things like high-density mixed use are not organic products from Burbank. They are brought in, and some people think they're a good idea. We can pack more development in, stack more projects in, not necessarily consistent. So as far as development is concerned, I think it's very important. I think there are ways we can develop. The council needs to give direction to staff and let it be known to developers that certain types of projects are acceptable for the people of Burbank and certain aren't. And we really have to weigh the impacts, long-term and cumulative impacts, that as far as traffic, parking, noise, congestion, pollution, all of these things have to be weighed, and not in some rushed fashion, and not bend over backwards to simply give away resources of the city, whether it's money or buildings for discounted amounts. That's not the way it should be. I remember the famous Gettysburg Address that our country is of the people, for the people, by the people, and the word is people. That's what I like to represent on the council, the people, and also consider how the people will benefit by appropriate development in our city.
Well, Dr. Gordon, on behalf of myself and Roy and all of Save Burbank Neighborhoods and the community here in Burbank, thank you for being with us today and answering our questions. Before we go, though, there's one last very, very important question we'd like to ask, and we hope you'll put a lot of thought into this.
Be careful with your answer on this one.
Indians or bulldogs?
That's easy.
Careful now.
I have the advantage of not having attended either of the schools. I think they're two outstanding schools. But I can give it to you from the perspective, I know faculties and students and people involved with both schools. Outstanding organization. I worked on this joint field school and city joint committee for the field. So, great. We did development at Burbank Fields and boroughs. I mean, it's great. However,
Here we go.
however, my son was a bulldog, and he played water polo and football. And I confess that I would root for the Bulldogs. And
All right, get out. No.
and so I do tend to be partial when I see them because it reminds me of my son's very intense involvement with sports when he was in high school. That being said, we're very fortunate. We have outstanding schools. Both are fine, and their sports teams are excellent all around. Sometimes we have the Bulldogs, sometimes we have the Indians, but they're excellent. So thank you for that wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon,
My
once
pleasure.
again,
Appreciate
and
it.
all the best in the future, and we'll be seeing you at our city council meetings.
Thank you, guys.